Chapter 1180, Cold Logic. Shadow Slave. They ate in comfortable silence. Sonny knew that both Nephi's and Cassie were tired and only had a little time to rest before Morgan would need them again, so he did not waste that time with idle conversations. It was not like he had a lot to say, anyway. Still, there was one question that he had to ask. Pushing the plate away, Sonny glanced at Nephi's and lingered for a moment. I was told that there might be some kind of duel instead of a battle. Do you think it's possible? She did not hurry with an answer. Neph cradled a cup of tea in her hands as she stared into the amber liquid. Eventually, she said, I don't know. It is a kind of tradition. The legacy clans would not have survived if they resolved every conflict by spilling rivers of blood. There are actually not that many of us, after all. However, neither Valor nor Song are acting the way they used to. So it's hard to tell. Sonny remained silent for a few moments, thinking about who the champions were going to be if the duel really happened. Would the great clans send saints to fight each other? Or masters? Would Morgan and Mordred cross swords and spill each other's blood? Or would Morgan send Nephi's to fight in her stead? He just did not know. Shifting slightly, Sonny looked at Neph and asked, what if the battle actually happens? Do you think that Valor can win? Up until now, it seemed like Clan Song was confidently pulling ahead. However, he doubted that their enemy would be easily defeated. This time, Nephi's did not hesitate at all. Yes. He studied her motionless face with curiosity. Where did that confidence come from? Why? Sonny expected Neph to say something in her usual style, like, because I am with them. Or, because that is my will. However, she simply shook her head and said in a slightly subdued tone, because they are of war. He blinked. Indeed, she was right. Clan Valor was the clan that had inherited the lineage of War God. The deity of warfare, life, progress, technology, craft, and intellect, as well as the patron goddess of humanity. It was not a coincidence that they were exalted fighters, masters of forging memories, and the most influential clan among both the awakened and mundane humans. They would also be the paragons of warfare. It did not matter if Clan Song had managed to achieve slight superiority at the earlier stages of the conflict. All that mattered was who would get the last laugh, and Sonny had no doubt that Morgan had many diabolical schemes stored in that pretty head of hers. However, there was a slight wrinkle in that theory. He leaned back. That is true. But you forget one thing. Mordred is also a descendant of war. He shared the same blood. And he is with Song. Nephi's frowned. It seemed that she indeed had not put too much weight into Mordred's presence in Antarctica. Really, she couldn't be blamed. Although Sonny and Cassie had told her about their experiences in the Night Temple and the Kingdom of Hope, she had not lived through those trials herself. She had not experienced the suffocating horror of being locked in a citadel with that monster, watching as the number of his victims grew while the number of survivors dwindled. Eventually, Nephi shrugged. It doesn't really matter, does it? Sonny stared at her with a dark expression. I think it does. Why wouldn't it? Neph sighed. What do I care if Valor wins or loses? I just need to survive. If they win and I help them, my status within the clan will grow. If they lose and I survive, it will grow even more, simply because there will be fewer powerful warriors for the clan to lean on. In their absence, my importance will grow. Either way, many members of both Valor and Song will die. As she spoke the last words, white sparks ignited in her eyes. Suddenly, the interior of the APC seemed to be filled with incinerating heat. Nephi's had been acting strangely placid for a long time, so Sonny almost forgot how frightening her murderous obsession was. He looked at her, surprised by that cold logic. Well, she was right, in a way. But it matters to me, though. Nephi's blinked a couple of times, startled, then looked at him in confusion. Why? Sonny frowned. Because these people that are going to die are supposed to be protecting the refugees from the hordes of nightmare creatures. Who is going to do that if the bastards all kill each other? Neph seemed as if she didn't know what to say. She remained silent for a long time, then sighed. I wouldn't put my faith in the great clans. Doing so will only lead to ruin. Sonny chuckled, thinking how funny that sounded coming from her. Shaking his head, he then looked at Cassie, who had been silent until now. What about you? What do you think? Any helpful visions of the future? Cassie smiled weakly. No. No helpful visions. She touched her hair, and then suddenly said, "Oh, but I think that you should check on Rain." Sunny flinched. His eyes widened. Why? Have you seen something? Cassie tilted her head, then paled slightly and looked away in embarrassment. Ah. I'm sorry. I worded that poorly, I think. No, I haven't seen anything. It's just that we are going to venture deep into the wilderness, and who knows what will happen next. Chances are, we're not going to have access to the network for a while, so. You mentioned that you're exchanging messages, and she might get worried. Sunny stared at the blind girl for a few moments, flabbergasted. Standing up, he picked up the plates and walked away to clean them. Gods. Think before you speak next time, all right? You almost gave me a heart attack, damn it. Go to sleep, you two. Nephi's and Cassie climbed into the sleeping niches while he washed the dishes. Once that was done, Sunny threw an irritated look at the niche where the blind girl was sleeping and grimaced. She is right, though. I might not be able to send a message to Rain for a while. Settling in the pilot's chair, he took out his communicator and checked his messages. To his relief, Rain was perfectly fine. She was going to school, training, and showing zero symptoms of being infected by the nightmare spell. Soul Serpent was with her, as well, so Sunny allowed himself to calm down. He stared at the screen of the communicator for a while, then sighed and started typing. Yeah, I'm doing well. Naturally. Remember that promotion I wrote about? Well, I am a glorified pencil pusher now. Most of my duties have to do with confirming requisition requests and forwarding letters. Honestly, it's driving me crazy. Scouting the wild expanses of the southern quadrant alone was much more fun. Anyway. I've been thinking about this and that recently. Like what I want to do with my life, and how I'm not that young anymore. Stupid stuff like that. So. This is what I was thinking about. As he typed the long message, the cold sun slowly moved across the sky outside the APC, never falling behind the horizon. The day never seemed to end, but time was flowing by. Soon, the forces of two great clans were going to meet in the wilderness of East Antarctica. The outcome of their ill-fated clash could very well decide the fate of the dying continent. Chapter 1181, 3 Armies. Sunny climbed to the roof of the APC and looked at the ravaged plain of East Antarctica, which stretched in all directions as far as the eye could see. He could have sent his shadows instead, but on a day like today, Sunny wanted to see it all with his own eyes. The ground was gray, and the stormy sky was gray, too. The ribbons of shallow brooks and the distant lakes were dark, resembling lead. The world seemed to have grown deathly silent, like a predator preparing to lunge at its prey. The air was brimming with suffocating tension. In front of him, at some distance, an abandoned outpost could be seen, tilted and with its alloy walls ripped open. There was an ugly black rift of a nightmare gate shimmering with darkness in front of the desolate fortress, and near it, indifferent to the maddening whispers of the call, a small figure could be seen, sitting on the ground. It was hard to tell anything about the figure from that distance, except for the fact that it was a human. Surrounding the outpost from 3 directions, 3 armies were preparing to advance. The Great Clan Valor, the Great Clan Song, and the hastily assembled government force that was supposed to mediate a compromise. Through effort and a bit of luck, or misfortune, depending on how one looked at it, all of them had reached the Nightmare Gate on the same day. Then again, maybe it was part of some insane calculation. The gate was situated at the very border between the territories of the 2 clans, and at that point, Sunny wouldn't be surprised by anything. He was still with the war party of Clan Valor. The awakened warriors had already disembarked from the transports, and were now silently assembling into a battle formation. Those that would be fighting on foot were positioned at the center, and those that rode echo mounts were assembled at the flanks. 5 people stood in front of the loose phalanx: Morgan, Maddock, Nephi's, St. Tyrus, and the Summer Knight. Opposite them was a much larger force. Sunny could not really see, but he knew that Beastmaster, Silent Stalker, Dire Fong, and Saishan were leading it. Behind them were the awakened warriors of Song. And, surrounding the awakened, was a sea of enthralled nightmare creatures. Countless thralls were standing motionlessly, as if frozen in place. It was eerie and deeply disturbing to see the abominable monsters acting so subdued and obedient. The government force was by far the smallest of the three, numbering just 100 awakened or so. Even though they were too far away to make out details, Sunny felt an overpowering sense of unease radiating from their small formation. Well, they were right to feel scared. Not only could the plain soon become a battlefield, but the abandoned outpost, and the nightmare gate in front of it, were deep within the hunting grounds of a corrupted titan. The creature was nowhere in sight, for now, but there was no guarantee that it would not arrive soon, attracted by the smell of human souls and spilled blood. What a disaster! Sunny was full of hatred toward the great clans. His contempt was justly earned, too. He had personally killed many members of Song and Valor, be it through sabotage or with his own hands. And yet, he was not happy to see them preparing to slaughter each other. He was not sad, either. Just resigned. In any case, there was no place for useless emotions right now. Sunny had to steel himself and prepare to do what was needed. Neither army seemed to be moving. The wind was picking up, and the lonely figure in front of the nightmare gate remained motionless, as if inviting them to approach. After a while, several people separated from the formation of the government awakened and walked forward. As if it were a signal, Morgan took a step forward. The rest of the Valor leaders followed her, and after hesitating for a bit, Sunny jumped down from the APC and hurried to join them. As he left the formation, he glanced at Cassie, who had stayed back and was flanked by 2 Knights of Valor. The blind girl seemed calm, but he could see her hands trembling slightly. Leaving her behind, Sunny caught up with Morgan and the rest. Nephi's and Tyrus looked at him with inscrutable expressions, but the princess herself seemed amused by his decision to involve himself in the negotiation. Master Sunless. How nice of you to join us. He glanced at her darkly and shrugged. Well, my boss is over there. What else am I supposed to do? Morgan chuckled, seemingly unbothered by the fact that she, and all her people, could very well die today. In fact, she looked almost excited. Indeed. And what does a government agent like yourself think about the situation? Sunny frowned. First of all, I am not a government agent. I just volunteered my services to the evacuation army, for the duration of the Antarctica campaign. Secondly, I think that all of you have lost your minds. Sunny had a lot of thoughts about what was happening, but it all boiled down to the fact that he still did not clearly understand the motives of the great clans. From his point of view, this whole despicable war was pure lunacy. Which meant a lot, coming from him. Even if Sunny considered the desire of the sovereigns to expand their domains, many things still didn't make any sense. The timing of the conflict, the wasteful strategies, the excessive urgency of their actions, neither Valor nor Song were behaving normally. They were not fools, so there had to be something wrong with their heads, surely. Morgan smiled. Lost our minds. Ah, I see. I guess it would indeed look like that, from the sidelines. Her smile disappeared, replaced by cold ruthlessness. However, I can assure you, it is the world that has gone mad, not us. After that strange remark, there was no more time to talk. The nightmare gate drew nearer, and finally, Sunny could see who was waiting calmly in its shadow. It was a slender young man clad in a suit of dark armor, with pale skin and raven-black hair. His face was sharp and thin. Not exactly handsome, but at the same time charming and strangely beautiful. His most striking feature, though, were his eyes, which didn't seem to possess a color of their own, and instead reflected the world back on itself like 2 pools of liquid silver. Mordred had been crouching on the ground, his expression calm and reserved. Noticing the approaching emissaries, he slowly rose and looked at them with cold intensity. Sunny expected a familiar grin to appear on the lips of the Prince of Nothing, but instead, Mordred remained strangely impassive. Then, finally, a corner of his mouth bent upward in a dark, joyless smile. You've finally arrived. Chapter 1182, Good Show. You've finally arrived. 3 groups of people stared at Mordred with different expressions. First were the emissaries of Valor. Morgan and Maddock kept their emotions in check, while Sky-Tide and Summer Night seemed grim. Nephi's was her usual indifferent self, but there was a hint of curiosity hidden in the depths of her calm gray eyes. The emissaries of Song were less reserved. Beastmaster was looking at Mordred with barely contained anger, as were Dire Fong and Silent Stalker. The first was just as he had been, somber and savage-looking, while the latter was an unassuming and elegant woman in black leather armor. Her beautiful face was inexpressive, but there was deep contempt in her strange feline eyes. Saishin was the calmest of them. She wasn't even looking at Mordred, instead studying the faces of the champions of valor. Jet was standing behind her quietly. Lastly, there were the representatives of the government. Sunny shifted uncomfortably. What the hell are they doing here? Saint Cor was, of course, leading the small delegation, but there were two familiar figures behind him. Kai and Effie had somehow ended up as the escorts of the government transcendent, and were now looking at the Prince of Nothing darkly. They had never met Mordred, but the echoes of his actions had impacted them, both before the second nightmare and within it. There were a couple more government masters with Wake of Ruins, as well, but Sunny did not know them. Why did he have to bring those two here? Sunny frowned, then silently separated from the Valor emissaries and went to stand behind Saint Cor, shoulder to shoulder with Kai. Jet did the same, taking a place beside Effie. In the silence that followed, Mordred's words hung in the cold air. The Prince of Nothing lingered for a few moments, and then looked at Morgan with those strange, mirror-like eyes. Sister. Sunny had long noticed that Morgan never used the word brother when speaking about Mordred. In fact, when the reflection addressed her as sister, she seemed to have been enraged. He expected a similar reaction this time, too, but instead, Morgan smiled coldly. I have to say, I am impressed. I never imagined that you would dare to face me with your actual body. I've always regretted that I wasn't there to cut it, the last time. Mordred looked down at himself, then raised his head and stared at his younger sister. Oh. This thing. Yes, it is a bit reckless of me to use it, isn't it? But then again, it's not every day that I get to meet my family. I thought that if I was going to kill you, I should do it with my own two hands. Sunny tilted his head a little, suddenly distracted. Come to think of it, how did Mordred's own body end up here? His original one had been destroyed by Clan Valor, but the spell had to have created a new one for him after the second nightmare. Nevertheless, it would have been incredibly hard for the Prince of Nothing to arrive in Antarctica unnoticed while wearing his own face. Taking the body of someone like Ascended Bast would have been both easier and smarter. Unless. Assuming that Mordred's body could survive while his soul was wandering someplace else, he could have just stored it somewhere and then retrieved it at the right moment. He could have even carried it with him using a special memory. Or maybe an unknown facet of his power. Suddenly, Sunny felt a cold chill running down his spine. Did Mordred have a collection of human bodies he carried around in some strange mirror dimension, like a macabre wardrobe of flesh? That sounded exactly like something the madman would do. As he was thinking, Beastmaster suddenly spoke, her voice so friendly that it actually sounded terrifying. I am very sorry to interrupt this touching family reunion, but... At the risk of sounding petty, could I maybe receive some explanations? Prince Mordred, if I may. Why couldn't you just follow the damned plan? Don't tell me that you've been secretly working for your father this whole time. That would be such a disappointment. Mordred remained silent for a moment, then glanced at the alluring saint with a somber expression. It is nothing like that. Please accept my sincere apologies. During the battle to conquer Black Skull, the warriors of valor became suspicious of my identity. So, I had no choice but to act. Beastmaster studied his face with doubt. It seemed that she was not convinced by that rather logical explanation. However, it was not like anyone could disprove Mordred's words, and, in fact, he had no reasonable motive to lie or sabotage their plans. Doing so would have been madness. Mordred sighed. I understand why you might be angry and distrustful, my lady. But please believe me, my intention is and always has been to help your mother achieve victory over Clan Valor. My family has to pay for what they've done to me. There's no one. How wants to see them fall more than me? I would have followed the plan if there was the smallest chance of success, but now. Well. All I could do is offer you my blade. He turned to face Morgan and snarled, and use it to cut the down. Mordred's voice sounded flawlessly impassioned and sincere. It was so compelling, actually, that Sunny almost believed him. Of course, he knew better than to trust a single word coming out of the lying bastard's mouth. Morgan scoffed. You blade. What can you even do with a blade? She unsheathed her own sword and leaned on it, smiling. Come on. Show me. There was something very strange about that sword. Sunny had never seen it before, and he suddenly felt chills when looking at the austere double-edged blade. Mordred stared at the sword, as well, his expression growing bleak. After a few moments, he said quietly, I guess he is watching, then. Then, his lips suddenly twisted into a dark grin. Well, in that case, let's give him a good show. With that, the air around him suddenly rippled, and 6 mirror shards became visible, hovering above the ground. Sunny's eyes narrowed. Reflections. Transcendent, all of them. Then, the mirror shards suddenly glinted, transforming into human figures. Nephi's finally showed a reaction, white flames ignited in her eyes. There, surrounding Mordred, now stood 6 people. As he smiled, the reflections of Whispering Blade, Summer Night, Sky Tide, Beastmaster, Silent Stalker, and Dire Fong smiled with him.